Hello and welcome to Lore of the Cards, the series that looks to help you discover the lore hidden within your Hearthstone deck. In our last full episode, we looked at the Rogues Grand Tournament legendary, the Traitor King Anub'arak. This time, we'll be looking at a man who, once infamous, would eventually become the leader of one of the most influential organisations on the face of Azeroth, the mage legendary, Rhonin. The art of the card is by the artist duo Zoltan Boros and Gabor Sky, whose names I'm sure I just butchered. The two Hungarians formed a friendship in high school and started collaborating on artworks. The two friends are influenced and inspired by each other, carefully listening to one another's criticisms and take advantage of each other's skills to create their work. This method has clearly been successful, as they have produced art for Dungeons & Dragons, Magic the Gathering, and of course art for the World of Warcraft trading card game too. Altogether, they produced a staggering 138 original pieces for the Warcraft TCG, and their work can be found in all aspects of Hearthstone too. In Naxxramas, they are responsible for Kel'Thuzad's hero power and one of the Four Horsemen's spells. Their art has been used in staff credit cards, cards that cannot be obtained normally, such as 2 of Ysera's Dream cards and 17 standard cards, Argent Squire, Fel Reaver, Gorhal, and of course, Rhonin, to name just a few. A lot of what I'm going to cover here has already been covered in our Kel'Thuzad episode, so click the annotation to jump straight to Rhonin's story. Rhonin belongs to an organisation of mages called the Kirin Tor. Their formation started approximately 2,800 years ago during the Troll Wars. These wars were fought between the High Elves and the Armani Forest Trolls, a conflict that the Elves were on the verge of losing. Luckily for the Elves, the humans of Azeroth had recently united under a single banner to form the Kingdom of Arathor. The humans had once been made up of a series of different tribes, many of which had experienced firsthand the cruelty of the Trolls. Chieftain Thoradin of the Arathi tribe saw that the Trolls, once finished with their arch-enemies the Elves, would eradicate all threats to their dominance, including the human tribes. Thoradin set about uniting the tribes to form Arathor. Using a mixture of diplomacy and force, he founded the city of Strom. With the humans united, the elves saw that they could make for powerful allies against the trolls. King Anastarion sent out diplomats to Strom to negotiate a possible alliance with the humans, a pivotal moment for the elves, who were now on borrowed time. Despite the fact the elves had on occasions treated the humans no better than the trolls had, Thoradin was no fool. Without the elves, the trolls would be far more powerful than any other empire on the continent of the Eastern Kingdoms. Their tyranny would go unchecked, slaughtering all that even posed a minor resistance. While the elves could also be cruel and aloof, looking down on lesser races, they often kept themselves to themselves, content with what they had, not hungry to conquer. With this in mind, Thoradin agreed to an alliance with the elves. To thank the humans for their aid, the elves taught 100 of them the art of the arcane. Having never used magic before, the humans stumbled over their first steps into this new experience. But in a relatively short amount of time, the elves discovered that these beings that they thought so primitive actually had an affinity for magic. With the humans now possessing enough skill to wield magic in battle, and the military might of Strom backing up the elves' own forces, it was time for the final encounter with the trolls upon the Ulturak Mountains. After several days of non-stop battle, the humans and elves were able to win out, the new mages playing a key role in their victory. After the war, the humans returned to their city of Strom. But over time, the mages found the city's wariness of magic and limited resources a burden to their studies. They wished to research and discover more about their new fantastical abilities. They left the city of Strom and founded their own city-state, Dalaran. This started a chain reaction of others leaving Strom to found their own kingdoms, and after a time, the kingdom was no more. Their research unchecked, the mages pushed the boundaries of what they were able to achieve. They built up the enchanted spires of Dalaran, mages came from far and wide to join this haven, and others who could tolerate mages found further opportunity. They were able to make the relatively small city into an economic powerhouse. With the magical defenders of Dalaran, they were able to strike up some favourable deals. Dalaran became an opulent paradise. The mages' unchecked use of magic had consequences. The elves hid their use of the arcane using a magical barrier, so that they did not attract the attention of the Burning Legion, a demonic force drawn to Azeroth by use of the arcane, whose first invasion of the world had only just been repelled. Unhidden, the humans' use of magic was drawing the Legion's agents once again to the planet, making their way there through rips in reality. Taken by surprise and confused by this new demonic threat, the humans sought the counsel of the elves. The elves informed the magocrats, who ruled Dalaran, that the way to prevent demonic invasion completely would be to give up magic. Having dedicated their lives to magic, the magocrats weren't ready to abandon it, so worked out some defence measures with the elves. One was the Order of Tyr's Fall, which gave birth to the Guardians, which you can find out more about in our Medivh episode. Another order born round this time was the Kirin Tor, whose responsibility was to research and catalogue all human magic. This order would later replace the magocrats as the governing body of Dalaran. Despite these safeguards implemented by the humans and the elves, the Burning Legion once again had their eyes locked on Azeroth. Several decades in the past, the Orcs of Draenor came through the Dark Portal to invade Azeroth. Unbeknownst to Azeroth's denizens, these green-skinned brutes were to act as a preliminary force for the Legion, weakening Azeroth for a full-scale invasion. The first war was fought between the Orcs and the Kingdom of Stormwind. It wasn't until the second war that the Kirin Tor viewed the Orcs as a very real threat. King Terenas approached Dalaran and many other kingdoms to form an alliance to stand against the Orcs, and it did not take much to convince the mages to join the war effort. The mages were so effective during the early stages of the war that the Orc warlock Goldrinn created Death Knights to counter them. Dead bodies containing the souls of powerful Orcish warlocks. These warlocks had been slaughtered by the new war chief, Orgrim Doomhammer, in an attempt to remove the demonic corruption from the Horde. It is during the Second War that Rhonin Redhair's tale begins. Rhonin was a young mage that brimmed with talent for the arcane arts. Despite his talents, Rhonin had several character flaws. He was arrogant, hot-headed, and quick to act rather than think. This reckless attitude would see him disgraced in the eyes of the Kirin Tor. Rhonin and several colleagues were sent on a mission by the Kirin Tor to take out a band of Orcish warlocks. When it became apparent that these warlocks were in fact trying to resurrect a demon, Rhonin hastily prepared a powerful spell. As the battle broke out between the Orcs and the Alliance, they all found themselves in the path of Rhonin's spell. When it was unleashed, Rhonin succeeded in stopping the Orcs, but he also killed all his companions. The headstrong Rhonin would always hide how much he regretted this action, and the guilt he felt for taking his companions' lives. Furious with Rhonin's negligence, the leaders of the Kirin Tor suspended him from service. Rhonin became a pariah, with anyone suggesting that he may be suitable for a job immediately being shut down. Rhonin had not been entirely excommunicated, though he would spend a majority of the Second War with his wings clipped. The Second War came to an end with the Alliance claiming victory over the Orcish Horde. Despite a brief period of peace, it was not long until the Council of Six, the heads of the Kirin Tor, began to hear disturbing reports. The Six met to discuss what should be done. Their identities remained hidden under cowls. While the Orcs had been routed and many of their race placed in internment camps, a few pockets of resistance remained. One of the Orcish clans posing the most resistance were the Dragonmaw, based in the region of Khazad-Mudan. These Orcs had been able to capture the Red Dragon Queen, Alexstrasza, and force her to produce eggs. The young dragons that hatched were raised to become terrifying mounts for the orcs. Reports had come in of interesting activity happening around Khaz Modan, though this was not news, as the orcs always looked to make themselves a thorn in the side of the Alliance. One of the council brought up a more disturbing report: the possible return of Deathwing. It had been believed that the aspect of death had met his end in combat with the mages of Dalaran at the tail end of the Second War. The dragon had been battered by a hail of arcane energy and fallen into the sea. Deathwing's arch enemy was Alexstrasza, before she had been restrained by the orcs. 2 corpses of red dragons had been found, utterly torn to shreds, no doubt by something larger than themselves. It stood to reason this could be Deathwing, as there was no corpse found after his defeat. There was a more pressing matter for the mages than the orcs and the possible return of Deathwing: squabbling among the Alliance over the Kingdom of Alterac. The kingdom had been left leaderless after its ruler, Aidan Perinold, had betrayed the Alliance as he feared the orcs would win the war. When Perinold's treachery had been discovered, martial law was quickly imposed upon his people, and now with the orcs defeated, arguments had arisen as to who should control Alterac. The debate had become even more heated, with the leader of Gilneas, Greymane, now also wishing to claim the kingdom for his own. It took almost all the Kirin Tor's agents to help King Terenas maintain his leadership of the Alliance. The council knew that leaving Khaz Modan unobserved meant that greater threats could come to fruition, but they were unable to spare anyone with the political unrest surrounding Alterac. One of the 6 stepped forward with a suggestion. There is Rhonin. The rest of the 5 were not sold on this idea. After his last debacle, he isn't even fit to wear the robes of a wizard. He's more a danger than a hope. The others also chimed in, labelling Rhonin unstable, untrustworthy, a maverick, and a criminal. Despite this, the other mage continued. Rhonin was the only skilled mage they could spare. On a mission of observation to Khaz Modan, surely there was nothing he could do to endanger anyone else. Reluctantly, the council agreed, though one of them couldn't help but have one last jab at Rhonin. Perhaps if we are fortunate, Deathwing will swallow Rhonin, then choke to death. The mysterious mage, going by the name of Crassus, had actually been conversing with Rhonin for some time, and planned from the start to have him elected for this observation mission. Only he had grander plans than the rest of the Kirin Tor. Rhonin was not just being sent to observe the orcs, his mission was to free Alexstrasza. Rhonin took several days to prepare for his mission, collecting together supplies. These preparations made him 3 days late for meeting with his ranger companion that would escort him to the port of Hazek, Varisa Windrunner, sister of Sylvanas and Illyria. This was not a great start to their partnership, the elf finding the humans selfish and arrogant, not even apologising for his late arrival. Rhonin wanted to waste yet more time by resting in an inn before departing, but with some commanding words from Varisa, he agreed to begin their journey straight away. The pair journeyed almost completely in silence for 4 days, until they heard a low rumbling, followed by another. Varisa turned in her saddle and leapt at Rhonin, knocking the mage out of his just in time, before a dragon swooped down and gripped their 2 mounts in its powerful claws. Rhonin looked on in despair as his carefully chosen and expensive supplies that had taken him days to assemble were carried away by the dragon. He did not have long to mourn as the dragon turned on him and Varisa for another attack, orders being barked to it from its orcish rider. Rhonin and Varisa initially tried to run, but the dragon, with its affinity for magic, was able to keep a lock on Rhonin. As the dragon drew closer and closer to Rhonin, Varisa made a desperate bid for the beast's attention, throwing a rock into the side of its head. A desperate bid that worked. Dragons are intelligent beasts, but since the orcish mounts were reared from birth as beasts of war, their intelligence was highly undeveloped. While Varisa had attracted attention away from Rhonin, it meant that the elf was now on the dragon's menu. Rhonin did not forsake his guide and repaid her in kind. As the dragon went to strike, it stopped, a spell cast upon it causing it to uncontrollably itch. Though Rhonin would later reveal this was not his original intent, it worked. The dragon thrashed around so much, its orcish rider fell to his death, and when it recovered, it was met by new opponents, dwarven griffin riders. Rhonin and Varisa used this opportunity to slip away, but were now mountless with only a few days to reach their destination on time. Luckily for them, or in Rhonin's eyes, unluckily, they were discovered by paladins of the Silver Hand, led by Duncan Centaurus. A good portion of the paladins of the Silver Hand, during this period of time at least, regarded wizards as damned souls. Rhonin could even remember fighting alongside one during the Second War that believed that wizard's soul went to the same place as a demon's upon death, no matter how good a person the man or woman may be. Centaurus and his men treated Rhonin with disdain. However, they were a lot more amicable toward Varisa. The paladins took in the two travellers for the night, taking them to their settlement. Centaurus said he would escort Varisa and Rhonin to the docks come the morning to help the elf achieve her mission, not giving any care to Rhonin's task. During the evening meal, Rhonin excused himself, growing weary of the paladins doting over Varisa and their leader's ego. While he knew he should have gone to bed, Rhonin thought he should try to contact Crassus to inform him of the setback in his mission. When his horse had been carried away, Rhonin had also lost several items given to him by Crassus that would aid him in scouting Khazmodan and make communication between them easier. This meant the mage had to improvise. Pulling out a dark gem from his pocket, he began to mutter words of power upon the battlements of the keep. Rhonin found open spaces cleared his mind. Rhonin stopped mid-spell as he noticed the stars vanish for a split second. Reasoning to himself he was tired, he continued. He was then rudely interrupted by a young paladin, but before Rhonin could chastise him, a blast hit the side of the keep, knocking Rhonin off his feet and sending the young paladin to his death. A second blast caused rubble to tumble down upon Rhonin. The last thing the mage remembered before losing consciousness was being grasped by something akin to a giant hand, the talons of a dragon. The next time Rhonin awoke would be in the woodlands near the attacked settlement. Varisa and the paladins had gone out searching for Rhonin. The paladins all but certain he had been responsible for the destruction. Confident Rhonin had nothing to gain from attacking the keep, Varisa stood by her charge's innocence as they searched. As another night fell, the search party gave up their search for the day, setting up camp. It was at this time a strong gust blew through the camp. After a brief search, they found Rhonin, looking pale and exhausted. Rhonin was only able to open his eyes long enough to see Varisa's face, and mumble, "Ranger, how nice to see you again," before passing out. It was not long after waking that Centaurus began to question Rhonin, accusing the mage of the destruction of the keep, as the others from his order had seen him casting a spell before the explosion. Rhonin admitted he was casting a spell, but only to communicate with his superior. He was on an important mission for the Alliance. Something that Varisa could vouch for. Someone of her skill would not have been sent to protect him otherwise. Varisa calmly added that she would be willing to fight any of Centaurus' paladins to protect Rhonin, as confident in his innocence as she was. Swayed by Varisa's faith and not wanting to tussle with a skilled elven ranger, Centaurus conceded Rhonin's innocence. From Rhonin's fragmented memories, they concluded that the most likely culprits were goblins, lovers of explosions and chaotic mischief. Rhonin did not mention his saviour from death had been a dragon. The next day, the party continued on toward Hazek, but as they approached, they could hear no noise coming from the town. Very odd for even a small port to be so quiet. As Rhonin and company drew closer, they could hear the faint sounds of life, putting to rest their suspicion that the port had been levelled, though the reality turned out not to be much better. Before they entered the port, Rhonin and company were met by several griffin riders, the same that had intervened when Rhonin and Varisa were being chased by the dragon, led by Falstad Dragon Reaver. Volstad's actual surname is Wildhammer, like the name of his clan, but he was so proficient at slaying the beasts, he often went by Dragon Reaver. Volstad welcomed the party, wishing to find out why they had made their way to Hazak. When informed it was to find a vessel for Rhonin, Volstad told them it may be difficult now. Recently, 2 dragons had attacked Hazak, though luckily for the small port, the Griffin Riders were in the area and fought a glorious battle against the serpents, winning the day. Upon entering the port, Rhonin found that the damage to Hazak was a lot worse than the dwarves had let on, but he was determined to find travel to Khaz Modan. Turning to Varisa, Rhonin thanked her for her escort, but to his pleasant surprise, Varisa insisted on staying with him, as her mission was not done until Rhonin was on his way to Khaz Modan. The mage was happy about this, as he had grown quite fond of Varisa. What he was less happy about was Duncan's insistence to also stay, more due to his infatuation with Varisa than any wish to help Rhonin. To cover more ground in an attempt to find a vessel crazy enough to take Rhonin into Dragon Country, the 3 split up. The more Rhonin searched, the more the desperation of his situation revealed itself. The dragons appear to have targeted the ships in the port, burning many to their frames. Those that had been lucky enough to survive the attack had moved on to find safer and more lucrative locations. As Rhonin began to despair he may never reach the location of his mission, he noticed the dwarves still flew above Hazak. An idea struck him. Surely, if anyone was crazy enough to take him to Khaz Modan, it would be the dwarves of the Wildhammer clan. Their bravery, and some believe insanity, was legendary. Rhonin followed them until they landed. Volstad was nowhere to be seen, so it was the dwarf Moloch that he asked to take him to Khaz Modan. Moloch flat out refused the mage, but Rhonin was not to be dissuaded. He kept asking, and Moloch kept refusing, not through fear of Khaz Modan, but due to his prejudice towards spellcasters. Rhonin's insistence meant the proceedings became riotous, making a lot of noise and driving Moloch to lift Rhonin off the ground by his collar. Perhaps violence could persuade the mage to go away. Before anything too violent happened, Volstad arrived along with Varisa. Volstad was very much on Moloch's side, but Varisa stood by Rhonin. After a rather heated exchange, Varisa convinced Volstad to take her and Rhonin to Khaz Modan. Volstad had taken a rather forward and little unwelcome liking to Varisa, so agreed to the almost suicidal transport mission if she came along and rode on the back of his griffin. To Moloch's dismay, Rhonin would be riding on his. The party made their way to the inn. After all, the dwarves weren't flying without their griffins rested, and not without having a mug of ale or two. Rhonin took Varisa aside, furious. I, and only I, will continue on. You'll be returning with our good friend Volstad. If you think you are going any further, I'll send you back here myself. Rhonin wanted to complete his mission alone. Partially because he felt he worked best alone, but mainly because he didn't want any harm to come to his companions because of him. He did not want any more spectres of his past mistakes to haunt him. When morning came, Rhonin was more irritated when he found out Centaurus had managed to convince the dwarves to take him along. While Rhonin found the paladin annoying, he didn't want anything to befall him either. After Duncan handed over his seal of command to his second, which signified if anything were to happen to him, they would take over as leader of the regiment, the small party was ready to depart. Very soon into his first ride on a griffin, Rhonin told himself he would never ride one again. The beast sped across the ocean. The only landmass that lay between the heroes and their destination was Tol Barad. They would not rest here, as the island was stormed by the Horde early on in their invasion, and ever since, the island maintained a haunting aura that kept members of the Alliance away out of fear. The Griffins made great time, and after several hours, Khaz Modan was visible on the horizon. But so too were 2 other specks, moving in on them fast. The 2 dragon riders that faced the dwarves this time were clearly experienced, and with their griffins weighed down by their passengers, this would be a truly difficult fight. The sort of thing dwarves of the Wildhammer clan relished. Rhonin instructed Moloch that it was important to get him to his destination rather than fight, but when he saw a dragon bearing down on Varisa, he felt compelled to instruct Moloch back into the fray. Rhonin prepared a spell that struck both dragon and rider with a bolt of lightning. This was less effective than Rhonin thought it would be, only managing to stun the dragon and rider for a moment. Realising Varisa was now safe, Rhonin again, to Moloch's annoyance, instructed the dwarf to the shore. What the two had not noticed was the other dragon coming round to attack. Moloch sought to evade the dragon's swipe, but with Rhonin slowing his griffin, the dragon was able to tear at one of Moloch's mount's wings, injuring it, but not knocking it out of the air. As the injured griffin carrying Rhonin fled from the dragon, Rhonin looked up in horror as Duncan Centaurus' griffin edged closer, the paladin standing up on its back. With a mighty leap, Duncan jumped onto the dragon's back. Rhonin exclaimed, "He must be mad," to which Moloch replied, "No, wizard, he's a warrior." Duncan edged his way up the dragon's neck, but as he readied his sword to plunge into the dragon's skull, an axe bit into his back. The orc dragon rider sought to put an end to Duncan's plans. As the orc raised his axe for a mortal blow, Rhonin reacted quickly. He muttered a spell, causing a brilliant flash of light to appear before the orc. Dazed, the orc fell to his death. In his final moments, Duncan made eye contact with Rhonin, and silently conveyed to him his respect before plunging his sword into the base of the dragon's skull. Duncan died even before his body fell from the dragon. The dying dragon convulsed in the sky, and as it did, one of its wings hit Moloch and Rhonin. The two plummeted toward the ocean, Moloch to his death, but Rhonin was saved by a familiar clawed talon, a voice entering his mind. "I have you again, little one. Never fear, never fear." Rhonin's saviour had been none other than Deathwing. But the dragon did not wish to harm the mage. In fact, he wanted him to succeed in his mission to save Alexstrasza. When Rhonin recovered, Deathwing came to him in human form. Naturally, Rhonin sought to defend himself, attempting to bind the dragon with magic. But Deathwing easily shrugged off the magical bonds. He had Rhonin's full attention when he melted a rock to liquid magma just by pointing his finger at it. Deathwing told Rhonin that he mourned the dragon's dwindling numbers and sought to unite the flights, which were now separated through hostility and infighting. What Deathwing wanted in part was the artifact the Orc Necro Skullcrusher used to subdue Alexstrasza, the Demon Soul. This unassuming golden disc had been crafted by Deathwing millennia ago. Each aspect offered a portion of their power to the disc, all except Deathwing, who at this time was known as Neltharion. The disc gave Deathwing dominance over the other flights, but now it was in the hands of the orcs. Not only did Deathwing seek the Demon Soul, but he also wanted something more, something even more valuable to him. While Rhonin did not trust the dragon, he had no choice but to accept his aid. Deathwing made him a small silver medallion with a dark jewel at its centre. The amulet allowed him to easily communicate with Rhonin, even over great distances. Deathwing would be able to guide Rhonin through Khazmodan and Grim Batol, where the Dragon Queen was held. Deathwing delivered Rhonin as close to Grim Batol as he could, without the mage being discovered by the orcs. Allowing Rhonin to rest, he was only a few days on foot from Grim Batol. As he started to move to his chosen route, Deathwing's voice immediately entered his mind. The path Rhonin chose would lead him straight to the orcs. Deathwing showed the mage a vision of the path he should take. While the terrain was perilous, Deathwing insisted this was the only safe route to Grim Batol. Rhonin's hesitation irritated the dragon. Although he was attending to business elsewhere, through the medallion he had the power to physically force Rhonin to take his first few steps. Shocked by the dragon's abilities, Rhonin continued on this route. Luckily, Deathwing could not read Rhonin's mind, as he started to formulate plans to escape Deathwing's gaze. Deathwing guided Rhonin, providing the mage with food as he journeyed closer toward Grim Batol, and even transport in the form of a goblin zeppelin. Every now and then, Rhonin would glance over his shoulder, half hoping to see Varisa to know she was okay, but also hoping that the elf had returned home to safety. Duncan and Moloch's deaths already weighed heavy on Rhonin's conscience, and he did not want Varisa and Volstad to have joined them in death for the sake of his mission, especially as he had had to keep the true goal hidden from them. When the Zeppelin dropped Rhonin off, an irritated Deathwing once again took control of the mage's body. The goblins had attempted to trick Rhonin before arriving to their destination, trying to get him to leave the Zeppelin and fall several hundred feet. Both Deathwing and Rhonin had seen through this trick, but Rhonin stopped Deathwing from punishing the goblin as he saw fit, with death. This time, Rhonin could not stop him. Deathwing forced the mage into casting a fireball, and the burning remains of the Zeppelin and the screaming goblins plummeted to the ground. Luckily, the wind carried away any sounds of destruction, as the goblins had dropped Rhonin off right in front of an entrance to the Orc's base of Grim Batol. Rhonin found himself wandering round the winding passages for hours. There seemed to be no rhyme or reason to how they were designed. Passages would abruptly end, or suddenly dip or rise upward, as if the tunnellers changed their minds halfway through. Eventually, Rhonin sat for a rest, but he was startled to hear orcish voices, realising he had drifted off. But the voices were not closing in on him, as the odd acoustics of the caverns would have him believe. Deathwing had inexplicably been silent as Rhonin ventured through the orc's lair, but now he had direction, doing his best to use the orc's voices as a guide. As Rhonin heard the voices grow louder, he gained confidence in his direction and picked up his pace. As soon as he did this, he stumbled directly into two orc warriors. Luckily, the orcs were more surprised to see Rhonin than he was them, so he pressed his advantage, casting a powerful spell that shunted one of the orcs into the nearby cave wall. The orc's body merged with the wall until no trace of him remained. The other, now bristling with rage, charged Rhonin, madly swinging his axe at the wizard. Rhonin desperately searched his mind for a spell to distract the orc, and as he dodged, he noticed the orc's grim trophy. Around the orc's neck hung dozens of severed fingers. Elf, human, and whatever other unfortunate Alliance soldier met their end by the hand of this brute. This gave Rhonin an idea for a distraction. With a wave of his hand, the digits came to life. The fingers made their way up to the orc's neck and began to gouge at the soft flesh around his throat. The orc made a desperate bid to free himself of the fingers, but they kept going, ripping and clawing at his throat, as if driven by vengeance. The orc collapsed to the floor, his chest coated in his own blood. Rhonin cautiously made his way over to find that both the orc and the digits were now lifeless. Eventually, Rhonin came to another turn in the cavern system and heard voices emanating from within. Rhonin carefully looked round the corner to find a huge cavern bustling with activity. The orcs looked as if they were preparing to depart on a long journey. Had their situation become so dire in the war that now more soldiers were being called to the front? This did not just seem like reinforcements, however. These preparations looked as if a majority, if not all the orcs from Grim Batol were departing. What perplexed Rhonin further was the orcs' cargo. Dragon eggs in various stages of development. Why would the orcs risk damage to such precious cargo by moving it from Grim Batol? Before Rhonin could think of an answer, a voice permeated his thoughts. Human. Rhonin, where are you? Deathwing was once again contacting the mage. The dragon had caught only a glimpse of the orc's retreat through the medallion, so asked the mage what he had seen. Rhonin lied, saying the orcs were at battle practice. Deathwing once again took control of Rhonin, forcing the mage to hold the amulet up. A battle practice? I see. And is this how they practice their retreating? Deathwing made no further comment on Rhonin's lie, which if anything worried him more than if the dragon had. Deathwing informed him that he followed the wrong path, and something in the dragon's tone told Rhonin that he knew the orcs would be retreating. Rather than question Deathwing, Rhonin followed his instruction. Deathwing led Rhonin to the Dragon Queen's chamber, a journey of several hours. As Rhonin travelled, he heard goblin voices among the orcs. Perhaps this is how Deathwing knew of their retreat, and how he knew the cavern's layout so well. Deathwing deactivated the protective spells around the Queen's chamber, allowing Rhonin to enter. Alexstrasza, barely able to move, restrained by chains and clamps, looked toward Rhonin, her eyes widening with fear. Not for herself, but the mage. She managed to fight her restraints enough to say no, step back, but too late. Rhonin heard Deathwing utter, "Perfect." A blinding light surrounded the mage, agony coursing through his body. As he collapsed, all he could hear was Deathwing laughing and repeating the word, "Perfect." Rhonin slowly began to regain consciousness when he was roughly brought to his feet. He woke up with a start when an orc broke one of his fingers. Standing before him was Necros Skullcrusher, leader of the Dragonmaw clan's dragon breeding program. He immediately began to question Rhonin. "You've one chance for life. Where's the rest of your party?" Rhonin told the truth that he came alone, but was met with more threats. He began to answer the orc with what he thought he wanted to hear. Necros, a heavily scarred orc with a missing leg, made sure to beat Rhonin whenever the mage paused or didn't give him the answer he wanted. Necros believed the Alliance had sided with Deathwing, and a small party had been sent ahead to free Alexstrasza. These were lies, fed to him by his goblin double agent Krill, who worked for Deathwing. Necros used Rhonin's answers to fuel this theory, gloating to the mage that the orcs would be long gone before the Alliance arrived. Alexstrasza told Necros that his actions were insane. Rhonin got his first good look at the Lifebinder. Captivity had clearly not treated her well. Her restraints only allowed eating and speaking with great effort. Her scales, which must have once been a brilliant ruby, were now faded and loosening, and her eyes were tired and dull. Infuriated the dragon had spoke without his permission, Necros' hand darted into a pouch he carried, which caused the Dragon Queen to cry out in pain. None questioned Necros. Only his chieftain, Zuluhed the Whacked. This explained to Rhonin how the orcs had held Alexstrasza for so long, a hugely powerful artifact that it was likely Necros did not understand fully. If he did, the entire horde would bow to him. Necros did understand that the disc he kept had great power, for he planned to use it to fight Deathwing himself. Necros instructed his soldiers to throw Rhonin in a cell for later questioning. Through blurred vision, Rhonin made eye contact with Krill. The goblin winked at Rhonin, and he saw the creature now held Deathwing's medallion, affirming to Rhonin that they all danced to the Black Dragon's tune. After being roughly dragged to his cell and waking up from unconsciousness, an experience that must have been becoming tiresome to the mage, being unconscious that long is, super bad for you, Rhonin was met by a bone-chilling image. Necros had clearly followed after his guards to place extra security measures on Rhonin's cell. Staring back at Rhonin was a flame golem, unmoving, silently standing guard. Studying the construct, Rhonin could feel no heat from the flames emanating from it, but knew that the golem would burn all it touched. Knowing he had to at least try and escape, Rhonin slightly moved his hand to prepare a spell. No sooner had he done this, the golem's hand darted for Rhonin's. The unrelenting pain coursed through him, the burning pain so intense it felt as if the golem's fire burnt his very soul. When Rhonin was finally released, still reeling from the pain, he heard a harsh, grating voice. It belonged to Krill, Deathwing's spy. Since Rhonin was destined for death, Krill had come to tell someone about his master plan, a plan he couldn't keep to himself, but one he didn't want anyone of importance knowing. The goblin was tired of following orders, and now sought to make the Black Dragon aspect his slave. Producing Deathwing's amulet, which the dragon had thought destroyed or lost when Rhonin's body collapsed, Krill removed the black stone from the centre of the medallion. As this was actually a scale of Deathwing, Krill believed he could use it to bend the dragon to his will. Rhonin had once heard, to bear some bit of the greatest of the Leviathans is to have a hold on their power. But it had never been done, and the goblin would need tremendous magical power to make this work. Rhonin became agitated by Krill's plan, and the golem began to stir again, reaching out to Rhonin. The mage immediately froze, holding his breath. The giggling Krill left Rhonin to his fate. When Rhonin exhaled, the golem once again had hold of him, and Rhonin, yet again, lost consciousness. Rhonin drifted in and out of waking and dreaming. When he first woke, the golem was no longer there, but as soon as Rhonin even moved a hair, the beast rematerialized, making its presence known. The golem would unwaveringly guard whatever Necros told it to do, as it was a manifestation of the demon soul that the orc possessed. Rhonin found his thoughts and dreams turning to Varisa, remembering his companion with great fondness. The Varisa of his dreams began to speak, pulling him back to the waking world when all he wanted to do was stay. As his dream faded, the voice became clearer. Rhonin began to hear another voice, yet again familiar to him, that of Falstad. These were not dreams. Both Varisa and Falstad had braved the dangers of Khaz Modan to save their companion. Their adventure had also been filled with trials and tribulations, but that's a story for another day. Rhonin heard another voice amongst the two that gave him so much hope, the snivelling Krill. Varisa and Falstad had managed to apprehend the vermin to bring them to Rhonin. The orcs must have been too busy with their evacuation to notice the dwarf and elf. When Rhonin opened his eyes, he saw all three at the mouth of his cell, Krill being kept in check with a knife held to his throat by Falstad. With sudden horror, Rhonin realised what Krill planned to do, have both Varisa and Falstad killed by the flame golem. "Look out!" Rhonin cried, but it was too late. The golem coalesced before the rescue party, letting out a torrent of black flame from its mouth. Falstad and Varisa dodged, Krill being tossed to the side. An injured Rhonin watched as his friends valiantly fought against the seemingly invincible beast. The harder they fought, the more Rhonin realised that their deaths seemed inevitable. He had to do something. Summoning what strength Rhonin had left in his beaten body, the wizard broke free of his restraints. As he went to aid his allies, Krill jumped onto Rhonin's back, choking the mage. The wretch was incredibly strong despite his small stature. Rhonin was barely able to get a spell out before suffocating, but he managed to burn the goblin and cease its attack. Rather than go in for the kill, Krill chose to retreat and leave the golem to dispose of all three adventurers. However, as he darted for the door, the golem turned to him and spewed black flame in his direction. The goblin was burnt to cinders. The only thing remaining was the black gem that he had extracted from Deathwing's amulet. Focusing once again on its more direct opponents, the golem spouted fire up towards the cell ceiling, causing a cave-in. One of the falling rocks struck Varisa, giving the golem an opening to blanket the elf in flames. Rhonin saw what was about to befall her, and in desperation reached within himself to conjure whatever he could to protect Varisa. The need to save his friend outweighed the pain in his body, and the mage was able to cast a magical barrier, far more powerful than any he had cast before. The flames the golem spewed reflected right back at it, and to Rhonin's surprise, the creature's own weapon consumed it. Victory was short-lived, however, as the cell completely collapsed. Rhonin came to, an immense pressure in his head. When the mage opened his eyes to try and find a way to relieve the pressure, the cause became clear. The collapsing cell had fallen on Rhonin and his friends, but his barrier had held. The pressure he felt was the part of his mind that maintained the barrier and stopped them from being crushed. The mage could sense from the intensity of the pressure he did not have long to escape. Shifting, he felt something digging into his body. It was the stone from Deathwing's amulet. Pocketing it, Rhonin began to rack his already aching brain for a solution to his predicament. Volstagg called out to the wizard. His stirring must have alerted the dwarf. There was no response from Verisa. She was out cold, or worse. Once again, calling upon what strength he had, Rhonin was able to teleport him and his allies to safety. Rhonin was suddenly awakened by a chill wind. Against all odds, he had transported them to a snowy landscape. After discovering to Rhonin's delight Verisa still lived, they realised they now stood on the peak of the mountain that contained the Orc's dragon breeding operation. Rhonin had had a long time to think about what Deathwing planned. Why had he tricked the Orcs to move out of Grimbatol? The mage believed he had worked it out. Contrary to what Deathwing had told him at the start of the adventure in Khazmodan, the dragon did not plan to save Alexstrasza, but kill his rival once and for all while she was weak and exposed. As the sun rose, the Orcs began their exodus. Necros kept his eyes to the sky, expecting at any moment that the black Leviathan would soon swoop down to attack. The Orc's grip tightened round the demon soul, intending to use its power to bind the dragon's will to his own. The assault came from an unexpected place. From the crags of the mountainous region, hill dwarves who had aided Verisa and Volstagg reach Grimbatol ambushed the Orcs. Necros knew dwarves hid in the mountains, but he was surprised by just how many had escaped the Horde's wrath. Necros heard a titanic roar. Turning his eyes to the sky expecting to see Deathwing, the Orc was shocked to see a dragon of burning red. Rhonin and his two companions looked on helplessly as the battle raged below them. They tried to think of a way to descend the mountain. Rhonin was likely far too drained to teleport them safely again. It was a miracle he managed it the first time. They could end up anywhere, or in the path of an Orc axe. Volstagg had the answer. During his and Verisa's adventure, the dwarf had become separated from his trusty mount. Producing his calling whistle, the dwarf blew into it hard. No sound coming from it. After what seemed like a lifetime, the griffin answered. The three mounted the beast and headed for the battle. As the three flew toward their destination, Verisa noticed the red drake. Older than the dragons of the Horde and not raised in the mountain. The beast twisted and turned in the sky as if fighting an invisible foe. Looking toward the ground, Rhonin saw Necros. The demon soul pointed in the direction of the red Leviathan, the object glowing with power. Eventually, the red dragon could fight the demon soul no more. Retreating away from the battle, it soon came crashing to the ground. With the defeat of the red dragon, a different, more terrifying one entered the fray. Deathwing himself. The aspect of death moved with purpose, making straight for the Orc column, but Alexstrasza was not his target. Quickly and carefully, Deathwing grasped one of the wagons carrying the eggs of the Dragon Queen. With his own dragonflight all but extinct, Deathwing saw Alexstrasza's eggs to raise a new generation of dragons loyal to him, what would become a devastating force. Rhonin realised Deathwing's intent as the dragon kept swooping in, stealing more and more eggs. Necros had turned his attention to the black serpent, thrusting the demon soul in his direction, but it had no effect. Infuriated, the Orc commanded Alexstrasza's last remaining consort, Tyrande, who was weakened heavily by a fatal illness, to attack Deathwing. Compelled by the demon soul, Alexstrasza took flight, though he would have gladly fought Deathwing under any circumstances to protect his flight. In the midst of all this, Rhonin and his companions had landed. Varisa wondered aloud where Crassus was, the mage that had sent Rhonin on his impossible mission. He had also been communicating with the hill dwarves for this attack through an amulet, which was given to Varisa by the dwarves to guide her and Volstagg through Grim Batol. After all he had been through, realising Crassus had sent him, Varisa, Volstagg and the hill dwarves to their deaths, Rhonin was furious with his patron. Taking the amulet from Varisa, he noticed a gem in the centre had worked loose. Fixing it back, Rhonin yelled at Crassus through the amulet, demanding to know where he was. When no answer came, Rhonin went to throw the amulet to the ground. Just before he did, Crassus's voice permeated his mind. "Rhonin, praise be. There may still be hope." Crassus sounded ill, as if dying, and requested Rhonin's aid. Reluctantly, the young mage agreed, but Crassus needed Rhonin to come to him, and without warning teleported him away from Varisa and Volstagg. It was now that Rhonin realised that Crassus was no ordinary mage, but in fact was the red dragon he had seen fall to the demon soul, Alexstrasza, another consort of Alexstrasza who had remained hidden from the Horde all this time. Rhonin was not intimidated, giving the dragon a piece of his mind, saying he was no better than Deathwing for orchestrating the chaos that now erupted around Grim Batol. Flinching at the comparison, Alexstrasza admitted he deserved it, but implored Rhonin for his help. The dragon believed the demon soul was the key. Rhonin asked the dragon why the powerful artifact was unable to affect Deathwing. The answer came, but not from Alexstrasza. It came from a serene woman, with her eyes closed. As the dragon soul was created by Deathwing, it could not affect him. She and the other two men that accompanied her told Rhonin of how they had cast the soul into the deepest depths, enchanting it so that Deathwing could not wield it himself. But it appeared the black dragon had been able to influence the orcs and help them find it for him to bring destruction to Azeroth. The three figures that stood before Rhonin and Alexstrasza were the other three dragon aspects: Ysera, Malygos, and Nozdormu. They had isolated themselves from the world, but with persistent urging from Alexstrasza had come to attempt to stop Deathwing. Like Alexstrasza, they believed the demon soul may be the key. They donated some of their power to heal Alexstrasza, as it would be up to him to drop Rhonin near Necros to try wresting the demon soul from his grasp. The three aspects then changed into their spectacular true forms to fight Deathwing. Without a solution, their stand would be worthless. Even with all three of the aspects' powers combined, the demon soul housed a large portion of their power, and they would not be able to defeat Deathwing. They flew up to confront the black dragon, Alexstrasza's limp dead body in his grasp. Alexstrasza was able to drop Rhonin off near Necros, and the two fought. With the demon soul in his possession, Necros had the upper hand, able to knock Rhonin off a ravine, the mage clinging for his life. Before Necros could send Rhonin to his death, he was knocked off his feet by Volstagg and Varisa on top of the griffin. The trio were attacked by another orc, but with nimble spellcrafting from Rhonin, it retreated, turning the brute's axe into a snake-like creature that looked to entwine its wielder. The orc warrior was able to drive the three apart, which gave Necros his opening, knocking Rhonin to the floor and placing his peg leg squarely on Rhonin's back. Varisa made moves to save Rhonin, but the orc told her to remain where she was, or he would crush Rhonin's spine. Necros had lost the demon soul when he had been knocked back, and was convinced Rhonin knew where it was. As Rhonin insisted he did not know, the pressure upon his spine increased, until suddenly he felt a wave of heat, and the pressure was gone. Without the demon's soul in his grasp, Alexstrasza was no longer controlled by Necros. She had slain the orc, finally avenging all her young that had been sent to die in the name of the Horde. Thanking Rhonin for freeing her, Alexstrasza flew into the air to aid her fellow aspects against Deathwing, but even with her aid, they would be no match for him. Rhonin despaired, as without their full power, the aspects would be bested. Falstad remarked it was a shame Rhonin could not give them their power back. This gave Rhonin an idea. If he could find the demon soul and break it apart, he knew a spell that could direct the aspect's powers back to them. After a short search, Rhonin found the artifact buried under corpses and rubble. He tried smashing it on a rock, but it didn't even graze the surface. He asked Falstad to strike it with an axe he had wrestled off an orc. Lifting the weapon above his head, Falstad brought it down with all his might, but all this succeeded in doing was shattering the axe. When all seemed hopeless, Rhonin remembered Deathwing's scale. Since the dragon had created the soul, perhaps it was only a piece of him that could destroy it. Sure enough, the scale cut through the disc like butter. With their powers restored, the other aspects battered Deathwing. Nosdormu aged him before his time. Malygos pounded him with ice and fire. Ysera awoke his greatest nightmares, and Alexstrasza assaulted him with the pain he had put her through, every child she had lost, and the years of her imprisonment. Deathwing only just managed to break free. Screaming in pain, the dragon flew as fast as he could away from the battle. The others followed, but they would never catch him. Deathwing went into hiding in a different plane of existence known as Deepholm to recover, and one day bring his horrible vengeance to the world. But for now, the threat of the aspect of death had been driven away. With the aid of Rhonin, Varisa, Falstad and Corialstraz, the Hill Dwarves made quick work of the orcs. What would have been thought impossible was achieved. The Dragon Queen was freed, and the orcs were now on borrowed time. The Horde would soon be vanquished. Rhonin and Varisa were called to all kingdoms of the Alliance to give their accounts of their deeds, and celebrations broke out across the Alliance. The orcs, the Burning Legion's preliminary invasion force, had failed. Their second, the undead Scourge, would not. A product of the Legion, the Lich King was able to create and control a vast army of undead creatures. Not only this, but any warriors killed by the Scourge were soon resurrected, added to their ranks. After establishing control of the continent of Northrend, the Lich King struck out at the Eastern Kingdoms, starting with arguably one of the strongest kingdoms in the Alliance, Lordaeron. Not only did the undead bring Lordaeron to its knees, but the High Elven kingdom of Quel'Thalas was all but obliterated. Content that the Scourge had fulfilled its purpose of weakening Azeroth, the leader of the Burning Legion's armies, Archimonde, felt the time was right for the Legion to invade Azeroth. In order to summon the being of Archimonde's power into the world, preparations had to be made. The Lich King's champions, Arthas Menethil and Kel'Thuzad, performed a hit-and-run attack on Dalaran. They stole the Book of Medivh, which contained portions of the Last Guardian's spectacular knowledge. It was during this raid that the leader of the Kirin Tor, Antinidas, met his end protecting the city. As Kel'Thuzad prepared to summon Archimonde using the book, the full might of Dalaran was thrown against the Scourge. Even with the barrier between worlds weakening and Legion forces being sent to aid the Scourge, the powerful mages and their armies almost broke the Scourge lines. However, Archimonde was summoned, and one of his first actions was to demolish Dalaran.
Agir Udal Nutarus. Svetalun. Dalentaro ildas glaku. Rithum Zethara Samanar Gutamus. Belar Sumaris. Azaratha. Rakas. Inkula. Belan ora, mordanos melar, ilamur no falos kada.
Whether Rhonin and Varisa were involved with the battle for Dalaran cannot be said with certainty. What can is that the two were one of the very few that survived the Scourge invasion of Lordaeron. They fought side by side and on more than one occasion feared the other may have perished. Rhonin's remaining family were slaughtered when the Scourge attacked the small town of Anderhol. His father and two cousins had all met their end, and despite not having seen them since becoming a mage, Rhonin still felt a void in his life now that they were gone. It is also unknown whether Rhonin and Varisa were involved in the final battle that saw the races of Azeroth triumph over the Legion once again. Either way, the couple had experienced their fair share of the Legion's brutality. Once Azeroth was safe again, Rhonin and Varisa could finally act on their feelings for each other, which had steadily been growing over time. The two had fallen deeply in love with one another, a rare human and elf pairing, though one that seems to be bizarrely common in the Windrunner family. The two married, and after, Varisa fell pregnant with twins. Since the Legion's defeat, Rhonin had found himself in the role of a diplomat, doing his best to keep the frayed alliance together. The consequence of the Legion's invasion, like the Orcs, had left political tensions in their wake. Rhonin was not fond of this life. He was rash and looked to act, but rebuilding relations was a slow and tedious process. Despite his dislike for politics, Rhonin had all he wanted in Varisa and his approaching family life. But Rhonin's plans for marital bliss would soon be put by the wayside during an evening together with Varisa. A familiar voice entered his mind, one filled with concern and worry, that of Rhonin's old mentor, Crassus. The Dragon Mage was once again requesting Rhonin's help. Despite previously being tricked by Crassus, Rhonin held no ill will toward him, and even was quite fond of him. But the mage had a family now, which would very soon grow. This was the most important thing to him, not the whims of dragons. Rhonin declined Crassus's request for aid, but before the dragon departed, he insisted he show Rhonin and Varisa the very thing that made even a dragon fearful. They saw utter chaos, as if time itself was unravelling, their world at risk. Crassus had been reached out to by the aspect of time himself, Nosdormu. Even one of Azeroth's most powerful beings feared what was happening. Despite this, Rhonin still declined. Surely Crassus could find someone else. The dragon had come to Rhonin as humans are one of the most resourceful races on Azeroth, and not as stuck in their ways as dragons. With Rhonin's decision, Crassus went silent. To Rhonin's surprise, Varisa told him he had to go. While she understood Rhonin's want to be with her at the time of their children's birth to care for them, it seemed this event they had been shown could very well mean the end of their world. After all, Crassus would not contact Rhonin if it was not urgent. Begrudgingly, Rhonin reached out to Crassus, who instantly teleported the mage to his new sanctum. They would not remain there long, as a concerned Crassus insisted they should immediately depart. He transformed into his dragon form, and they left across the Great Sea from the Eastern Kingdoms to the continent of Kalimdor. The pair only stopped for rest once on an unnamed island. This island's residents were ghoulish creatures that attacked the companions in their dreams. Luckily, Crassus and Rhonin were able to defeat these fiends. They finally reached their destination in Kalimdor, a snowy mountaintop. Crassus was disturbed. He could sense Nosdormu, but it was as if the dragon was there, but somehow not. Turning back into his human form, Crassus and Rhonin ventured into a small passage where the dragon could sense the disturbance that Nosdormu clearly wanted them to find. Something else made their search even more difficult. The disturbance they sought kept shifting. After a while of travelling down the passageway, Rhonin and Crassus came to a fork. They agreed they would split up, taking only 500 paces and then reconvening at the entrance to the branching paths. This way, they could identify which passage held the most promise. Heading down the left passage, Rhonin could see at the end of his 500 paces that his route held promise. The thin tunnel widened, and he could sense a wrongness coming from further down the passage. This wrongness compelled Rhonin to explore a little further. But no sooner had he stepped beyond his 500 paces, he sensed a change in the disturbance of the cavern. It was moving toward him. Within moments, the disturbance lay in front of Rhonin, a force unlike any the mage had ever seen before. Time compressed and stretched within the anomaly. The walls of the cavern were both weathered by age and newly formed. Rhonin himself felt both older and younger just by staring into the sinister wonder. Colours the mage had never seen, and a cacophony of sound assaulted his senses. But before he could be swallowed by the anomaly, the mage turned and ran. Despite running as fast as he could, the disturbance kept pace with Rhonin, and the mage's problems were compounded when he was attacked by an 8-legged looping creature. This creature has never appeared in Warcraft lore, bar in the novel describing these events. The beast lunged at Rhonin, but he was able to dodge and prepare a fireball. But the words for the spell came out backwards, and the mage found his body being forced back to where he was when the beast first attacked. The edge of the anomaly had caught up, and time was in flux. Again, Rhonin managed to escape the beast, and this time cast a fireball. But before impact, it froze in place. The unaffected beast weaved round the fireball looking to attack Rhonin again. This time, the mage cast a spell to petrify the beast, and was able to once again fully concentrate on outrunning the anomaly. Crassus's voice permeated Rhonin's mind, full of concern for his companion. The anomaly was expanding at a growing rate. The only hope Rhonin had was to use his link with Crassus to teleport to the dragon's location. As he went to cast the spell, the anomaly reacted to the magic, and started to expand even more rapidly. Rhonin discovered this too late, and was swallowed up. A whirlpool of time passed before his eyes. He saw the past and the future, and before passing out, his last thoughts were of his love for Risa, and the children he would never know. Through his mental link with Rhonin, Crassus was also pulled into the anomaly, the same sensation sweeping him as Rhonin. But before passing out, the dragon saw something that chilled him to his very core. At the centre of this vortex of time was Nosdormu. The aspect visibly struggled to control the force as much as he could. Through sheer force of will alone, Nosdormu was the only thing preventing the anomaly from consuming all of Azeroth. Rhonin and Crassus awoke to find themselves in a forest. Crassus suspected it was Nosdormu himself that managed to save them from being torn apart, but they no longer knew where they were. Crassus tried to transform into his dragon form to scout the area, but was only met by tremendous pain that almost caused him to collapse again. Travelling through the forest, the two were able to find a water source and a place to rest. But they were not alone. A scouting party of night elves combed the area, seemingly drawn there by Rhonin and Crassus's arrival. While the night elves had been staunch allies during the battle with the Burning Legion, the two did not know which time period they were now in, so sought to evade the elves. This was next to impossible, however, due to the night elves' heightened senses, which was only further sharpened by the nightfall, hence the race's namesake. The companions were discovered, and it became apparent the elves were no allies, and instead sought to capture them. Crassus attempted to conjure a powerful spell, but this again brought the dragon mage to his knees. Rhonin tried to protect his friend by using a weaker spell to create a flame barrier. To Rhonin's surprise, this spell was far more powerful than it should have been, erupting in a brilliant wall of flame that blocked off the astounded elves. Luckily, Rhonin was able to recover from his astonishment before the elves, and he and Crassus took flight. The night elves, however, were eventually able to catch the two, and they were merciless. Several of their regiment had lost their lives to Rhonin's defence, and they took their frustrations out on the two, beating them to within an inch of their lives. When Rhonin awoke, yep, he's still getting knocked out a lot, the night elves were lost, and there was an emerald amulet around Rhonin's neck to prevent him from casting spells. The regiment, led by Captain Varathen, were at a loss. They knew the forest well, yet it seemed to alter their path. At the height of the night elves' frustration, the forest sprang to life, the trees and plant creatures turning on the night elves, wrestling away Rhonin and Crassus from their captors. To prevent Rhonin from seeing where they took him, one of the plant creatures puffed pollen in the mage's face, which caused him to enter a deep sleep. Asleep. Not knocked out this time. Crassus awoke before Rhonin to the discovery that their captor was the demigod Cenarius, a being that was dead in their timeline, though Crassus's memory also suffered along with his power. He did remember that Cenarius's power was vast and rivaled that of his queen Alexstrasza. In conversation with the demigod that now held the two companions prisoner, though in a much kinder way than the night elves, Crassus latched onto two landmarks mentioned by Cenarius. Zinashari, the capital city of the night elves under the rule of Queen Ashara, and the Well of Eternity, a font of incredible power created by Azeroth's shapers, the Titans, that aided in shaping the world. This also explained Rhonin's newfound power, as the well fed his already impressive magical capabilities. The mention of these two places filled the dragon with a great sense of foreboding. He knew these two landmarks had been destroyed in his time by a tragic event, but his fragmented memory was unable to put the pieces together. A day later, Rhonin also awoke, and Cenarius came to speak with his prisoners. He revealed why he did not let the two leave his domain. The demigod could sense that the two adventurers did not belong within his realm, or that of the night elves. Crassus agreed to tell Cenarius how the two had come to his lands. Rhonin thought this was a good idea, as surely if anyone was able to help them, it would be the powerful and benevolent Cenarius. But, to Rhonin's surprise, Crassus lied. The structure of Crassus's story was the same, but he changed key details. Nosdormu was not mentioned, the anomaly became a rip in reality, and the companions were strangers from across the sea, not from an entirely different time period. The story revealed, Cenarius went to discuss with his peers, who Rhonin guessed would be other demigods. When Cenarius was gone, Crassus revealed the need for his duplicity. His fragmented memories had come together. The dragon suspected that the two had been flung back 10,000 years into the past, just before the very first invasion of the Burning Legion. The horror of the second invasion still fresh in Rhonin's mind, he said they should warn Cenarius, but Crassus thought this was a bad idea. 10,000 years ago, the Night Elves succeeded in driving back the Legion. Simply by being in this time, Rhonin and Crassus could alter the events of the future just enough for the Legion to become the victors instead. Further meddling would see the future changed more. After this startling revelation, the two retired for the night. When Rhonin awoke, Crassus was nowhere to be seen. The dragon had noticed another of his kind spying on them and had been taken to see his queen, the only one he thought he could reveal the truth to. Unfortunately, the other dragon had neglected to take Rhonin along as well. This left Rhonin in a grim situation. Aware one of his prisoners had escaped, Cenarius returned, bringing further ill news. The forests were now stalked by otherworldly hounds that fed upon the magic of their victims. Cenarius had been convinced by the others that with Crassus gone, other means must be explored to discover the truth behind Rhonin. The mage felt a clawed hand fall upon his shoulder. The unknown demigod sought to extract the truth from Rhonin. The mage felt as if he floated outside his body, but due to his strong will and maybe his power boost from the well, Rhonin was able to resist. Cenarius, not fond of watching others suffer, put an end to the questioning, allowing Rhonin to rest. Rhonin remained in Cenarius' glade until the arrival of some unexpected visitors. A night elf and an orc. Since the orcs had invaded Azeroth not too long ago, he did not belong to this time period. Remembering what Crassus had said, Rhonin went to attack the orc, but Cenarius immediately came to the orc's defence. He had been expecting the visitors. The night elf was Cenarius' pupil, the first of the druids, Malfurion Stormrage. The orc was of Rhonin's time, a veteran warrior who had been sent by his warchief Thrall to investigate the anomaly. He too had been thrown back in time. The orc, Brox, had also seen the horrors of the Legion's might, the sole survivor of an attack during the second invasion. After welcoming his pupil in this other strange creature, it was not long before Cenarius' countenance darkened. His ancient glade, untouched for millennia, was about to come under attack. With little time, Cenarius and Malfurion crafted an axe for the unarmed Brox, using a tree limb from Cenarius' glade. The demigod's blessing made it far more powerful and durable than any handcrafted weapon. As the hounds approached, before even seeing them, Rhonin knew what they were. Fell beasts. Creatures that in his time had been harbingers of the Legion. Their scouting tactics had not changed in 10,000 years, it would seem. Rhonin knew that in order to try and preserve the future, he should not participate in the battle, but his noble intent of preservation vanished when the fell beasts attacked. During the struggle, Rhonin considered killing Brox, since he too threatened the timeline like Rhonin. This thought shamed the mage, as the orcs, while once enemies of the humans, had proved invaluable in the defence against the Legion in his time period. Not only that, but Brox sought to defend his allies and fought with all his ferocity and might. After Rhonin's empowered spellwork allowed him to dispatch several hounds, reducing them to ash, he was attacked from behind. Two tendrils from the back of one of the fell beasts latched themselves onto Rhonin's back, feeding on the mage's magical power. This made the fell beast stronger, and with enough energy, the beast would multiply into more. All Rhonin thought of was escape, and his determination allowed him to teleport away. Now traversing unfamiliar territory, it was not long until Rhonin discovered Brox, who had evidently been caught in his spell and dragged along with him. As the two worked their way through the forest, Rhonin and Brox discussed involving themselves in the coming conflict. Crassus' words still weighed heavily on Rhonin's mind, but Brox disagreed. The two were already embroiled in the conflict. The damage had been done, and he now sought to fight the Legion tooth and nail. Brox's reasoning and strong sense of honour brought a reluctant Rhonin over to his way of thinking. During their journey, the forests came to life, attacking the pair. After a short struggle, they found why the forest had assaulted them. A sleeping Malfurion was there, possibly also dragged away by Rhonin's spell. When Malfurion awoke, he was able to get the forest to relinquish its attack. In order for all three to recover from their ordeal with the fell beasts, Malfurion suggested they head for his home. It was at this time during a conversation with Malfurion that Rhonin connected the dots, that the Well of Eternity fed his newfound tremendous power. Upon reaching Malfurion's home, the trio came under attack and were captured by Lordaeron Crest and his new trusted personal sorcerer, Malfurion's twin brother, Illidan. The three were taken to Lordaeron Crest's fortress, Blackrock Hold, and brought before Raven Crest for questioning. Raven Crest listened as Malfurion told him of a dire vision he had seen of impending doom and the Well of Eternity in flux. The druid made sure to hide the fact that he believed Azshara was involved. The Night Elves idolised their queen, believing she was capable of no wrong. Rhonin chanced interrupting. This was risky, as 10,000 years in the past, the Night Elves were a vain race, viewing all others as lesser than themselves. Rhonin was allowed to speak, perhaps because he had proven himself to be a competent mage, more powerful than the Night Elf mages. Rhonin sought to validate Malfurion's claim. He spoke of his and Brox's arrival through a dimensional rip, and about just how unstable the fabric of Azeroth was becoming. Despite the fanciful tales, Ravencrest found himself believing what was said. However, Cenatius, a senior member of the Moonguard, an order of Night Elf sorcerers fiercely loyal to Queen Azshara, was not convinced. Ravencrest allowed Cenatius to question Malfurion magically. The young druid felt as if he had only been questioned for a few moments before letting slip that he suspected Azshara. As his weary body fell to its knees, Illidan dashed over to care for his brother and informed him otherwise. Malfurion had resisted for 2 hours. Cenatius had attempted several spells, which failed, unheard of for a Moonguard of his power. Malfurion's doomsaying vision had been given credence. The Night Elven mages were now cut off from the Well of Eternity, which they used to feed their magical power. Though the Moonguard and Ravencrest did not blame their queen, their loyalty made them blind. They blamed the Queen's right hand, Xavius. At that exact same moment, Night Elves gathered round the gates of Zinashari, looking to their queen for an explanation of why the Well's power had abandoned them. The gates opened, but the Night Elven people were not greeted by the welcoming arms of their queen, but by the first wave of the Burning Legion invasion, slaughtering all that stood before them. The Legion's invasion now underway, Rhonin decided to do all he could to ensure the past repeated itself, and the Legion were defeated. Since Rhonin had trained in the arcane arts with no Well of Eternity to fuel his power, he possessed a greater understanding than the Night Elves, and could wield powerful spells without tapping into the well. Rhonin pledged his services to Lord Ravencrest. During the first battle with the Legion, it was Rhonin's spellwork that prevented the Night Elven lines from completely buckling. Illidan also helped contribute, as he was still capable of casting, and now saw Rhonin as a role model. Rhonin happily took the young Night Elf under his wing, though he was concerned by Illidan's ambition and how he approached spellcasting. While Rhonin was quick and concise, ending his enemies' lives quickly, Illidan revelled in their pain and paid little heed to his allies as well. Illidan's unrelenting ambition would eventually lead to him being given the title, the Betrayer. Just as the first battle seemed all but lost, Malfurion was able to break the barrier shutting off the Well's power. The Night Elves' spellcasters and even their soldiers were renewed by the energies of the Well, and Rhonin was once again able to tap into it to create even more devastating spells. The Legion's initial attack was pushed back, but the war was far from over. Rhonin witnessed events that had shaped his current world. Neltharion the Black Dragon aspect was driven mad and betrayed his own kind, creating what would become known as the Demon Soul. And the blue dragonflight was almost entirely eradicated by the dragon that would soon become known as Deathwing. The Well of Eternity and Zinashari were destroyed, splitting Azeroth into the form we know today. And against all odds, the Night Elves succeeded in driving the Legion back. Though not all happened as it had before. One of the demon's main commanders, Hakar the Houndmaster, who controlled the Fell Beasts, was slain, when previously he was killed during the second invasion. The Night Elves' might alone was not enough. The Tauren, Earthen and Furbolgs came to their aid, and finally Crassus, with Nosdormu's blessing, was able to save several blue dragon eggs that previously, uncared for, would never have hatched. Subsequently, he helped save a portion of the blue dragonflight. With victory, the tears in the fabric of reality mended, and a now free Nosdormu was able to transport Rhonin and Crassus back to their own time. Brox had tragically died, giving his life to save the world. All that remained of the valiant orc was his axe, now in Rhonin's possession. Once back in their time, the axe would be taken to Warchief Thrall by Crassus, disguised as an orc, and Brox would be remembered as one of the greatest heroes of the orcish race. Rhonin awoke suddenly in a field. Coming to his senses, he saw his house in the distance. Hearing Varisa cry out, he darted for his home, ready to defend her, only to find that Nosdormu had brought him back just in time to witness something that made all the miraculous events of the past pale in comparison. The birth of his children, Giramar and Galadin. The present was exactly as it was before. Yeah, Warcraft lore doesn't deal with time travel too well. Rhonin returned to his duties within his own time, helping the mages of the Kirin Tor rebuild Dalaran in the wake of the Burning Legion's invasion. Rhonin's unorthodox methods that once made him an outcast were now embraced by his colleagues. The Burning Legion's destruction of their cities hit the mages of Dalaran hard. Stuck in their ways and constrained by tradition, they had been unable to adapt in time to protect themselves from the Legion. Rhonin rose through the ranks, as his methods saw better results in this time of uncertainty. The mages summoned a barrier over their city, hiding their work and protecting it from the wayward Scourge armies within the area. Rhonin and Varisa's troubles were far from over. Their offspring were a rarity, and as such had much unknown magical potential. Knowing others would seek to claim this power as their own, Rhonin set up several magical wards around their family home, to warn of intruders. It was a long time before these wards were activated. As a result, Varisa had grown slightly complacent, and was almost too slow to confront the villain that now sought to steal her children away. The identity of the attacker shocked Varisa, one of her old comrades that now called themselves a Blood Elf. During the war, the High Elves' font of power, the Sunwell, was destroyed by the Scourge. Now cut off from what many had been connected to for all their lives, the Blood Elves sought other sources of magic to feed on to satiate their endless hunger. As time passed, many of the elves left the Alliance and later joined the Horde. Varisa too suffered the hunger, but Rhonin helped her through it. Rhonin and Varisa's children were quite an exotic source of magic. Varisa was able to stop the Blood Elf, but what made this attack even more sickening was the elf was a blood relative of Varisa's, Zendarim Windrunner, her cousin. Knowing Zendarim would attempt to take their children again, Rhonin and Varisa knew something must be done. Rhonin, who had risen to lead the Kirin Tor, though he would much rather dedicate himself to his family, could not leave Dalaran. The mages were dependent on his leadership. Varisa would travel alone to deal with her power-mad cousin. Rhonin did not let the seasoned ranger depart without a few tools. He gave Varisa a magical blade and a pendant for them to communicate through, based on the design of the pendant Crassus used to communicate with his allies when saving Alexstrasza. Rhonin also crafted a dagger for Vereesa. The elf thought it wise to take a weapon not of traditional design. Rhonin crafted it from a pearl-like substance. This meant that it would be immune to magical detection. Each of these tools would prove vital to Vereesa during her travels. Over several days and nights, Rhonin helped the mages rebuild, contacting Vereesa daily. But one day, Vereesa did not contact him. Concerned for his beloved's well-being, Rhonin decided to investigate. To help him in his quest, several mages willingly gave Rhonin a portion of their power to aid their leader. Making use of this empowerment, Rhonin cast a potent teleportation spell to bring him within the vicinity of Vereesa. He arrived in a familiar place, Grimbatol. Once again, a dark evil was lurking within its depths. The initial teleportation took Rhonin to the necklace he had given Vereesa, but it was no longer attached to the elf. On several occasions, Rhonin tried teleporting to different areas of Grimbatol, attempting to find Vereesa. He needed to rest in between, as this type of spell is extremely exhausting. When preparing yet another attempt, Rhonin sensed a flare of power. Hoping he would find Vereesa here, he focused his teleportation there. At the end of his journey, he did not find Vereesa, but a Draenei priest, battling against Skardyne, dwarves that once fled to the depths of Grimbatol and were mutated by the dark energies beneath. Rhonin also saw a nether dragon from the land of Outland tied down by magical thread. Quickly seeing that he and the Draenei were outmatched, Rhonin grabbed her and teleported them both away just outside Grimbatol to an area known as Raptor Ridge. Rhonin was shocked to learn that the Draenei Iridi was in fact trying to free the dragon. Nether dragons were known to be aggressive, almost beast-like in comparison to the dragons of Azeroth. Iridi, however, had connected with the creature Zeraku and knew it could be redeemed. Zeraku's strange energy that made up his ethereal body was being used to fuel the plans of the new evil presence within Grimbatol, the presence that Zendarin Windrunner worked for. Iridi also informed Rhonin that she had met up with Vereesa. The elf was alive and well, but in captivity. She also told the mage that his friend Crassus had also been drawn to Grimbatol, seeking to put an end to the evil within, but he too had been captured. Knowing the power of his friend, Rhonin was sceptical, but Iridi revealed that Crassus had been suffering a sort of malady. The two regained their strength upon Raptor Ridge, Rhonin conjuring some refreshment. They began to sense a presence. The two were now surrounded by raptors. The creatures had fled their ridge due to what was happening in Grimbatol, but for some reason had returned. Raptors, wild beasts, still have a hierarchy. Their chieftain stepped forward, but the pack did not attack. Curious, Rhonin and Iridi approached. Using her training, Iridi was able to connect to the raptor. She saw them fleeing in fear, desperately attacking Alliance villages to claim new territory away from Grimbatol, but failing. She also saw Grimbatol in the past. The raptor chief remembered the orcs, the fighting that had gone on, and the power of Rhonin. The raptors did not wish to attack the two, but wanted to join them to aid in chasing the evil from Grimbatol. Preparing a spell that would leave him drained on the other end, Rhonin teleported the raptors, Iridi and himself to the chamber where he had discovered the Draenei. Once again, they returned to chaos. Dwarves were fighting against the Skardyne and the Dragonspawn and Draconid of the Black Dragonflight. Rhonin watched over Iridi as she attempted to free Zeraku as the raptors tore into their opponents. Not long into their work, Rhonin heard a terrifying roar, followed by a sinister laugh. On a ledge above himself and Iridi, a woman appeared, dressed all in black. One side of her face appeared to have been badly burnt, and was covered by a veil. The woman was the new evil within Grimbatol, mockingly inviting Rhonin to guess her identity. Deathwing had been defeated. His son and daughter, Nefarian and Onyxia, were dead. Rhonin sardonically replied that this woman must have been one of Deathwing's prime bitches. It was his prime consort, Cintharia, the only one of Deathwing's consorts to survive mating with the aspect of death after his madness consumed him. The burns of such a traumatic event still clawed at her body. Cintharia now called herself Sinestra, distancing herself from anything relating to her mate, now fueled by a passionate hatred for him. Sinestra then revealed her pet, one of the original dragons from the Twilight Flight, Dragonax, a flight with the potential to become more powerful than any other, that consume their adversaries' magic to become stronger. Dragonax, despite being very young, already dwarfed most other dragons, equaling the size of the consorts of the aspects. Sinestra had imbued one of her eggs with the power of the Nether Dragon, and kept control of her powerful creation using a reformed demon soul. While the soul had lost a lot of its power, the golden disc, which now comprised of pieces pressed together, was still a potent source of power. Sinestra had fueled Dragonax's might even further by using an artifact known as Malygos' Bane. Malygos was the son of Malygos, and had created his cube to absorb all wayward magic in Azeroth, magic that floated aimlessly. However, he miscalculated, and the cube drained him, leaving only a husk. Zeraku was freed only to die by the hand of Dragonax, his energy further fueling the beast. Crassus and his companion Kalecgos met up with Varisa. The elf was able to destroy most of the demon soul and her treacherous cousin in one. The two separate parties met for a concentrated effort against Dragonax, who Sinestra still controlled using a demon soul shard she kept at all times. However, Zeraku had exposed a weakness in Dragonax. Using Iridi's staff as a focus, she, Rhonin, and Varisa worked together to exploit this weakness, as the dragons Crassus and Kalecgos distracted Dragonax and Sinestra. Their focus succeeded in melting Sinestra's demon soul fragment, and her son Dragonax turned on her. She, Dragonax, and the demon soul were finally destroyed, or at least so it seemed. This victory came at the cost of Iridi's life, drained of all her energy. Yet another crisis averted, Rhonin and Varisa return home to be with their children. Rhonin once again took hold of the reins to rebuild Dalaran. He also made the City of Mages a neutral state, allowing members of the Alliance and Horde to study within its walls. Allowing both factions to study together meant they would be better prepared if a force like the Legion were to attack again. This drastic step proved to be the correct move when the Lich King, ruler of the Scourge, renewed his attack on the Alliance and Horde. The two armies marched to the Lich King's domain in Northrend to answer his hostilities. Rhonin and the Kirin Tor also heeded the call to battle. Constructing a magical matrix with some of his most powerful archmages, Rhonin was able to lift Dalaran into the sky and bring it to float above Northrend to better aid his allies. As the city travelled to its location, it was attacked by the Blue Dragonflight. The aspect of magic, Malygos, once driven mad by the loss of its flight, had finally regained some sanity. The aspect had come to the conclusion mortals did not wield magic responsibly and would attract the Legion again. His solution was to destroy all mortal spellcasters. Rhonin and the Kirin Tor narrowly averted defeat when the dragons made use of a double agent within Dalaran's walls to disrupt the magic allowing it to float. Thankfully, the agent was killed in time, however, and Rhonin committed to fighting both Malygos and the Lich King in Northrend. Having saved her life, Alexstrasza and the Reds aided Rhonin against Malygos, believing the Blues' claims were misguided. Malygos, unable to see reason, was eventually slain by adventurers within his own realm. When the explorer Bram Bronzebeard discovered the old god Yogg-Saron stirred in his prison of Ulduar, Rhonin was the man he came to.
How could we have missed this until now? King Varian, thank you for coming on such short notice.
What's this all about, Rhonin?
I've called you here to ask for your help. While our efforts against the Lich King press on, Bran here has brought us frightening news of the horrors beneath Ulduar, and of its dark prisoner.
Prisoner? With its binding shattered, its influence unchecked, it's gonna come after us, and we're gonna be the prisoners.
You can see now what we're up against. If this evil is not stopped, then the armies of the Death God will march on our doorstep.
You'll have to excuse me.
Well, what do you propose we do?
Thrall, what are you doing here so soon?
The summons sounded dire, Jaina. What's happened?
Bran Bronzebeard's forces assaulted the gates of Ulduar. They battled the Iron Lords and their cursed minions.
Evasive action! Evasive action!
He won't stop talking about this presence he felt, permeating the great halls, stirring in their minds, chilling their blood. He said, the horror that the Titans imprisoned so long ago, Yogg-Saron, has awakened.
I want to see this dwarf, Garrosh, to see the fear in his eyes. Then we'll know if he's telling the truth.
No, wait!
We are going to need all the help we can get if we are...
Thrall!
What? What are they doing here?
Let me explain!
I thought I smelled the stench of Alliance pigs.
Control yourself!
You want my blood? Come then, dog!
He's mine!
Stop it!
We have all lost! A great deal in this conflict! But we stand to lose everything if we do not stop fighting and work together!
A true war chief would never partner with cowards.
At the Wrathgate, the Horde's partnership killed more of our men than the Scourge. I'm done with your Horde. May this Death God take you all. You disappoint me, Garrosh.
The old god is laughing, toying with us.
Who will be our hope?
Who will stand and face Yogg-Saron?
Rhonin and the Explorers League joined together to aid any adventurers foolhardy enough to attempt to defy Yogg-Saron. Thanks to their invaluable help, the heroes were able to subdue the old god and free those that had been corrupted by it. The heroes also subdued Algalon the Observer, a servant of the Titans who was to destroy Azeroth if he deemed it too corrupt. The heroes convinced him otherwise. After the Lich King's defeat, Rhonin remained a key political player, even being invited to the wedding of his old Night Elven allies Malfurion Stormrage and Tyrande Whisperwind. However, dark times were on the horizon. Deathwing returned to the world, and his arrival created shockwaves that rippled across all of Azeroth. The world was forever changed, and the new war chief of the Horde, Grommash Hellscream, took advantage of this. Unlike Thrall, Garrosh sought to conquer, and one of his first targets was Theramore. The city was led by Jaina Proudmoore, who had strong ties to the Kirin Tor. After much deliberation, as Dalaran was a neutral state, Rhonin decided to help Jaina. She had always tried to mend the rifts that drove the Alliance and Horde apart, and had subsequently proved herself honourable and worthy of aid. A small force, including himself and Varisa, went to help defend Theramore. The mages of the Kirin Tor set about strengthening Theramore's defences. However, one of Ronin's mages, Thaelin's Songweaver, was a Horde loyalist and betrayed the Kirin Tor, deliberately weakening the gate he had been put in charge of defending. Thaelin was found out and placed into custody. Even with his interference, Theramore and its defenders seemed to be able to drive the Horde back. This was a feigned retreat, however. Turning his eyes to the sky, Rhonin noticed a goblin zeppelin with a giant mana bomb attached. The mage had very little time to act, but knew the devastation that could be caused by this weapon would be monumental. Rhonin travelled to Jaina's tower within Theramore, which was heavily warded in magic. He met with Jaina, who opened a portal for them to escape. Rather than join her, Rhonin drew upon the tower's magic to summon every bit of power he could, and used it to lessen the destructive blast of the mana bomb. Rhonin succeeded, saving many lives, including that of his beloved wife, though many did perish. Just as the portal sealed, Jaina saw Rhonin's final moments. His expression was one of grim defiance as he raised his arms up in the air. He put everything he had into containing the explosion and saving the lives of his comrades, before he was reduced to nothing but a pile of purple ash. His final thoughts were of his beloved wife Orisa and his children, who he would never see grow up. Jaina was to succeed Rhonin as leader of the Kirin Tor. So, there you have it, an in-depth look at the lore surrounding Rhonin. Congratulations if you made it this far, and thank you so much. I've been working on this a very long time and appreciate anyone that's bared with me until the end. If you enjoyed the art, the artists are credited in the description below. If you've enjoyed the video, a like, share and hitting that subscribe button would be hugely appreciated. I should be releasing content a lot more regularly now, but I've gone on long enough for now. Happy Hearthstoning, and I hope to see you soon for more Lore of the Cards.